My brother cheated with my fiancée and my family forced me to give up my place as the groom for him. I was 24, had a successful career, lived in my own apartment, and was completely in love with a woman who seemed perfect in every way. Looking back now, I realize how the universe was preparing me for the biggest plot twist of my life. My name is Marcus, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought I wanted, only to find something much more valuable, myself. Helena entered my life like a character straight out of a romance novel, 6 months of pure bliss, or so I thought. We could talk for hours. Plan our future together. Dream about the life we would build. Her success. Her charm. The way she seemed to understand me completely. It all felt meant to be. How funny how the things that seem most perfect often hide the deepest cracks. One night, curled up on my couch, I made the decision that would unknowingly unravel my entire world. "I think it's time you met my family," I said, my fingers playing absent-mindedly with her hair. "They're going to adore you. Even my brother will have to admit you're perfect." My brother, Isaac, 2 years younger, fresh out of college, still living at home with our parents while he figured out his next move. We had grown up sharing everything, secrets, dreams, clothes. Lately, however, he had become distant. I attributed it to post-graduation stress and the job hunt. God, how naive I was. The family dinner was scheduled for the following weekend. I spent hours getting ready, methodically applying cologne, changing outfits 3 times, my hands trembling slightly as I smoothed down my shirt. Helena arrived with a bottle of wine and a bouquet that must have cost a small fortune. The moment she walked through the door, my mother's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Oh, Marcus," she whispered, cornering me in the kitchen, her eyes shining with approval. "She is absolutely wonderful, so polite, and so beautiful." I also caught Isaac's reflection in the kitchen window, his lips curling into what I took as petty jealousy, the successful older brother, with his perfect life while he was still sleeping in his childhood bedroom. If only I had known then what that smirk really meant. The evening flowed like honey, sweet, smooth, and perfectly orchestrated. Mom and Helena connected, talking fashion trends and business strategies. Dad couldn't stop gushing over her professional accomplishments. Even Isaac's initial Ice King demeanor seemed to thaw as the night wore on. As we were leaving, Mom pulled me into a tight hug, her perfume enveloping me like a family blanket. "Don't let this one get away, my love," she whispered. Those words would come back to haunt us all in a matter of weeks. Helena and I were discussing marriage, not with a grand gesture or a bended knee. It simply came up one night over pasta and wine, like we were discussing weekend plans. "We could do it in 6 months, she suggested, her hand reaching across the table to find mine. "Nothing too fancy, just close family and friends." My parents practically exploded with joy when we told them, immediately offering to split the wedding costs with Helena's parents. Isaac sat through the entire announcement dinner, pushing his food around his plate, occasionally making these little huffing sounds that everyone politely ignored. Looking back, those little sounds were actually warning sirens. I just didn't want to hear them. The next 2 months became a blur of wedding preparations. Every spare moment was consumed by decisions that, at the time, seemed of global importance: flowers, cake tastings, endless venue visits, vendor meetings. I was exhausting myself trying to balance my job with the wedding planning, often staying late at the office to meet with our coordinator. That Tuesday started like any other day, a morning meeting with a florist, plans to work late finalizing the reception timeline. But around 2 p.m., a splitting headache hit me like a sledgehammer. My boss took one look at my pale face and sent me home. I thought about surprising Helena. She usually worked from home on Tuesdays. Maybe we could order takeout, tackle some wedding to-dos together. A quiet night. Just the 2 of us. The apartment was silent when I unlocked the door, but there were muffled sounds coming from our bedroom. I assumed Helena was on a work call. She often took them in there for better sound quality. The doorknob was cold under my fingers as I pushed the door open. Time didn't just stop. It shattered. The world didn't just pause. It imploded. There, in our bed, with the sheets I had picked out when we first moved in together, were Helena and Isaac, my brother, my fiancé, tangled together like they belonged there. Isaac didn't even flinch, just looked at me with this almost bored expression, like I had interrupted him during some mundane chore. Helena scrambled out of bed, the sheets tangled around her waist. "Marcus, baby. I can explain." Something inside me snapped, not with a bang or a scream, but with a chilling calmness that scared even me. Without saying a word, I walked to the closet, gathered her clothes, and marched straight to our 3rd-floor balcony. "Marcus." "No," Helena yelled. Too late. I watched with icy satisfaction as her clothes danced on the air, scattering across the parking lot below like confetti from a celebration gone wrong. "Out," I said, my voice carrying a stillness I didn't know I possessed. "Both of you. Now." Isaac had to wrap himself in our Egyptian cotton sheets, the ones I had splurged an entire paycheck on because Helena said they reminded her of a fancy hotel we had stayed at for our 6-month anniversary. The sight of him shuffling towards the door, trying to maintain some dignity while draped in the physical evidence of their betrayal, would have been comical if my heart weren't also being shredded like confetti. I slammed the door behind them and slid down, crumpling around my knees on the hardwood floor. The setting sun painted shadows across the walls of our living room, turning everything unrecognizable, like my life. When my phone rang, the name Mom flashing on the screen, a small part of me felt relief. Mothers are supposed to be your safe harbor in a storm. They're supposed to hold you while you cry. Tell you everything will be okay. Remind you that you are stronger than you think. But life is not a Hallmark movie. How dare you humiliate your brother like that? Her voice sliced through the speakerphone like a razor blade. Throwing her clothes off the balcony, making him leave in a sheet, what were you thinking? The laugh that escaped my throat did not sound like me at all. What was I thinking? What was I thinking? He was in bed with my fiancée. You are always so dramatic. Marcus, this is exactly why Mom interrupted, finding strength in my own voice for the first time that day. The wedding is off. I will contact the vendors tomorrow. No, you will not. Her tone shifted, unnaturally calm, like the air before a tornado. The wedding is still on. Your father and I talked to Helena's parents. We talked to Helena and Isaac. The wedding will proceed as planned. Isaac will take your place. Have you ever been hit so hard you look for blood? That's what I did. 5 simple words, Isaac will take your place. And I actually looked down at my chest expecting to see a physical wound. Surely something this painful had to leave a mark. You cannot be serious, I whispered, my free hand pressing against my sternum. That is insane. You cannot just. We have paid for half of this wedding, Mom interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. Helena's parents have paid their half. Everything is booked and paid for. We are not throwing all that money away just because you are having a tantrum. A tantrum? Every word felt like it was being ripped from my throat. My fiancé and my brother were in my bed. How is that a tantrum? Marcus, she sighed, using the same tone she used when I was 5 and didn't want to share my new toys with Isaac. You need to grow up and stop being so emotional about everything. These things happen. Click. The line went dead. That night exists in my memory as fragments. Like a shattered mirror reflecting different pieces of pain. I remember crying until there were no more tears. Screaming into pillows until my throat felt like sandpaper. Throwing up twice. My body physically rejecting the betrayal. The morning sun found me curled up on the bathroom floor. Still in yesterday's clothes. Dried tears staining my cheeks. My phone buzzed around 9 a.m., my cousin Martin's name lighting up the screen. Just seeing his name brought the first hint of warmth I had felt since yesterday. Marcus. His voice was hesitant, carrying the weight of unwanted news. I just got off the phone with your mom. A pause stretched between us, thick with things he didn't want to say. She has been calling everyone in the family. My stomach dropped. The bathroom tile suddenly feeling colder against my skin. What is she saying? She is telling everyone that Helena broke up with you because she fell in love with Isaac. Martin's voice became quieter, softer, like he was trying to cushion the blow of his next words. She is saying it was all very civil and mature, but that you are not handling it well. They are telling everyone that the wedding is still on, just with Isaac in your place. I pressed my forehead against the wall, its cool surface anchoring me to reality. My entire family was being turned against me. The narrative being rewritten while the ink of betrayal was still fresh on my heart. My parents were painting me as the villain while they shielded my brother, my cheating, treacherous brother. Fury burned through me that morning, but it wasn't the destructive kind. No, this was something different, something transformative. There, on that bathroom floor, still wearing yesterday's clothes and last night's tears, I made my decision. I would not give them the satisfaction of a meltdown. I would not cry, scream, or plead. I would simply disappear from their lives as completely as they had erased me from theirs. The next morning, I walked into my boss Monica's office before she had even had her first coffee. I stood tall, despite the exhaustion that weighed on every bone in my body. I need more work, I stated, my voice firm. The most challenging projects you have, I want them all. Monica studied me over her glasses, her eyes lingering on my carefully groomed appearance that couldn't quite hide the shadows beneath. Marcus, you are already carrying a full load. And with the wedding there is no wedding, I interrupted. The words tasting less bitter than they had yesterday. And I need to be busier. Much busier. Something in my expression must have convinced her because she opened her drawer and pulled out a thick file. The Morales account, no one has been able to crack it. It's yours if you want it. That weekend, I found a new apartment, a small studio across town. I changed my phone number, blocked every family member on social media, and threw myself into work like it was the only lifeline in an ocean of pain. The Morales account? I cracked it in 2 weeks. The Salazar project? Impossible? Completed a month ahead of schedule. Every challenge Monica threw at me, I conquered. I worked 14 hours, took online courses at night, and studied our competition like my survival depended on it. In a way, it did. Working was the only thing keeping me from thinking about them. About how Isaac and Helena were probably living their happily ever after in the house we had planned to buy. About how my parents were still coddling their good son while telling everyone such a shame about their eldest. A year passed in a blur of spreadsheets and presentations. I was promoted to senior manager. My drive fueled by the need to prove something, no longer to them, but to myself. Another year passed, and I became director of operations. By year 3, I was the youngest vice president in the company's history. My salary tripled. The studio became a beautiful loft downtown. The kind of place guys like I used to walk by, dreaming of someday. Only I bought it myself, with my own money. Every time I walked through those doors, pride surged through me. Not the hollow kind that comes from showing off, but the deep satisfaction of knowing exactly what I was capable of. I started traveling first, testing the waters with weekend getaways to nearby cities. Then came bigger adventures, Paris in the spring, where I sat alone in sidewalk cafes, writing in my journal and feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. Tokyo in the fall, losing myself in the neon lights and finding parts of myself I never knew existed. The Greek islands in the summer, where the azure waters seemed to wash away the last vestiges of bitterness from my heart. I posted pictures of it all on Instagram not to prove anything, but to document my journey, both physical and emotional. Each picture was a milestone in my transformation from someone's son, someone's brother, someone's almost husband to simply me. 3 years. 3 years without hearing their voices, without sitting at their table, without knowing anything about their lives, except for the one fact I could not escape, that Isaac had married Helena. Martin mentioned it casually during one of our infrequent text exchanges, probably testing the waters to see if I would react. I did not. The news landed like a pebble in a still pond, a small ripple that quickly faded to nothing. I was happy. Not the kind of happiness I thought I had with Helena, which I now realized was all about pleasing others and fitting into their expectations. This was deeper, more authentic, a contentment born from knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. A familiar number, something, intuition, maybe, or just cosmic irony, made me answer. "Hello, Marcus." My mother's voice. Sweet as saccharin. "Like we had spoken just yesterday, honey, is that you?" The fake cheerfulness in her tone made my teeth ache. She was using the same voice she used when I was little, and she wanted me to share my new toys with Isaac. "What do you want?" I kept my voice neutral. "Professional." The same tone I used in board meetings when dealing with difficult clients. "We, your father and I, need to talk to you." The artificial sweetness cracked slightly. "Could you come over to the house, please? We have been having some serious discussions about everything. About you." I should have hung up. I should have blocked this number like all the others. Instead, I heard myself saying, "When?" "Saturday. Around 6? I will make your favorite dinner." "Good." She hung up before I could say anything else. The week crawled by like molasses in winter. I buried myself in work even harder than usual, trying not to think about the upcoming visit. But my calendar seemed to mock me, that Saturday appointment staring back at me like an accusation. My assistant caught me looking at it more than once, her worried glances following me around the office. When Saturday arrived, I spent an hour getting ready, armor disguised as fashion, perfectly styled hair, carefully chosen designer outfit, not to impress, but to protect. If I was going to walk into the lion's den, I would do it looking like someone they could no longer touch. I drove my Mercedes slowly through my old neighborhood, memories washing over me with every familiar turn, the Jimenez house with its perpetually perfect lawn, the park where Isaac and I used to play as kids, the street corner where I had my first kiss. Everything looked exactly the same, but somehow smaller, less significant. But when I pulled up to my parents' house, I barely recognized it. The place looked tired, worn down, like it had aged decades in just 3 years. The lawn, which my mother once took such pride in, was overgrown, weeds pushing through neglected flower beds, paint peeled from the siding like old scabs, and the front steps needed repair. I didn't bother knocking. This wasn't a social call. The inside hit me with a wave of memories I wasn't prepared for, the same furniture, the same vanilla candle scent Mom always loved, the same pictures on the walls, though I noticed they had taken down all the ones with me in them. And there they were, all arranged like some twisted family portrait, my parents, looking older and more tired than I remembered, Isaac, with 2 toddlers clinging to his legs, one who looked about 2, the other barely a year old, and Helena standing beside him with her hand on his shoulder, looking exactly the same, except for a slight fullness around her waist. I waited for the pain, the rage, any of the emotions that had nearly destroyed me 3 years ago. But there was nothing. They were strangers to me now. As irrelevant as the peeling wallpaper behind them. Isaac's eyes raked over my outfit, my watch, my carefully curated appearance. Envy dripped from his voice as he said, "You look good." I smiled, all teeth and no warmth. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not wasting time plotting to steal other people's fiancés. "Marcus." Mom's voice carried that familiar note of disapproval. "Please, everyone, let's just sit down and have a nice dinner." I picked at the overcooked chicken on my plate. Not really hungry, but needing something to do besides watch this surreal family tableau unfold. The kids, my supposed nieces and nephews, were the only ones making any real noise. The youngest banging a spoon against his high chair while the eldest whined about his peas. The sound echoed off walls that held too many memories. Mom cleared her throat, her fork scraping against the plate like fingernails on a chalkboard. "We've been following your success, Marcus." Her voice carried a manufactured brightness that made my skin crawl. "Those pictures you post, your apartment looks absolutely lovely, right in the heart of downtown, is it?" I took a deliberate sip of water, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. "And your job? Vice president?" She glanced at Isaac, who was staring intently at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. "We're all so impressed with how well you're doing." "Why am I here?" I set down my fork. The soft clink against the china cutting through the facade. "Because I know it's not to discuss my social media posts." Mom's practiced smile faltered slightly. She pushed her food around her plate. "A habit she used to scold us for when we were kids." "Well, you see, things have been a bit difficult lately." She looked at my father. "Your father, why don't you tell him?" "Dear?" Dad looked older than his years as he spoke, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "I lost my job 3 months ago. Budget cuts. I've had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital." Mom chimed in, her voice strained with barely contained desperation, "just to keep up with the bills. The mortgage, the utilities, everything is so expensive these days." I kept my face neutral, waiting for them to get to the real point. The point that had required this whole elaborate dinner theater production. And of course, with Isaac staying home with the children. Mom gestured toward my brother, who was now trying to wipe something off his younger child's face. "They're managing on just Helena's salary, but with 2 little ones, what exactly does any of this have to do with me?" I asked, even though the puzzle pieces were already clicking into place. Mom's face brightened, seemingly missing or choosing to ignore my tone. "Well, we were thinking that Isaac really needs to find a job. But childcare is so expensive these days. And since you have such a flexible position," I stared at her, waiting for the punch line. It didn't come. I started to laugh, the sound sharp and incredulous in the stifling dining room. "You're seriously suggesting that I should babysit their children? You have that big apartment," Mom continued enthusiastically, as if I hadn't spoken. "And I'm sure you could work from home some days. The children are really very well behaved." The 2-year-old chose that moment to hurl his sippy cup across the room, screaming at the top of his lungs. "This is a joke, right?" I looked around the table, taking in each face. "You're not actually asking me to babysit my brother and ex-fiancée's children?" Dad cleared his throat. A sound that used to signal wisdom when I was younger, but now just sounded tired and hollow. "Well, if you're not comfortable with that arrangement, you could help pay for proper childcare." His eyes flickered to my designer watch, a subtle nod to my salary. I leaned back in my chair, the same chair I had sat in for countless family dinners, letting the sheer audacity of their request wash over me. They had ambushed me, served me my mother's mediocre cooking, and orchestrated this entire evening, all to ask me to play babysitter to my brother's children or open my wallet for them. "No," I said, standing up slowly, my voice carrying the weight of 3 years of hard-won strength. "Absolutely not. I will not be their babysitter, and I will not be their ATM." "Marcus," Mom's mask of concern slipped, revealing the anger beneath. Her face flushed crimson, the way it used to when I refused to lend Isaac my toys. "How dare you be so selfish, after all we have done for you?" Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle like my world had 3 years ago. "You ungrateful, greedy little boy, you sit there in your designer clothes, living in your fancy apartment, while your brother can barely afford diapers." A strange calm settled over me. The kind that comes with absolute clarity. My brother's financial situation is not my problem. My voice was cold as ice, matching the temperature of their hearts. 3 years ago, you all made your choices. You chose him. You chose her. You made it very clear where your loyalties lay. Now you have to live with those decisions. I walked out to a symphony of chaos, their voices following me down the driveway like angry ghosts. Helena had the sense to remain silent, but I could hear my parents calling me every name in the book, while Isaac sobbed over his children. Their voices grew fainter with every step I took, like a bad dream fading in the morning light. But they weren't done, not by a long shot. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Mom had posted a long diatribe on Facebook about her heartless son who had forgotten his roots and abandoned his struggling family in their time of need. The comments started rolling in immediately. How could I be so cruel to my own brother? Those poor babies need their uncle. Money changes people. These comments were coming from relatives who knew what had happened 3 years ago. People who had seen the whole drama unfold, and yet, here they were, piling on, sending me private messages about how I needed to get over it and help my family. I blocked them all, every single one. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they vanished from my social media, one by one. I didn't bother explaining or defending myself. They had chosen their side a long time ago, but my family wasn't finished. I was in the middle of a meeting with our biggest client when my assistant burst in, her face pale with panic. "Mr. Mendoza, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your family is in the lobby. Your brother has 2 crying children with him, and your parents are demanding to speak with Mr. Ortega." The weight of their desperation had followed me here, to my sanctuary, to the life I had built from the ashes they had left me. Excusing myself to my client, I rushed to the lobby, my shoes clicking against the marble floors like a countdown. There they were, Mom and Dad making a scene at the reception desk, while Isaac stood there with both children screaming at the top of their lungs. People were staring. Phones out recording. My family had brought their circus to my workplace, trying to shame me into submission. We demand to speak to whoever is in charge, Dad was yelling, his face red with indignation. He cannot treat his family this way, we'll see what his boss has to say about this. I walked over to Carlos, our head of security, who was already moving toward the situation. My voice carried the quiet authority I had earned over 3 years of rebuilding myself. Those people are not permitted in this building. Please remove them. I watched as Carlos efficiently escorted them out of the lobby, their shouts echoing off the marble floors like the last desperate cries of a dying relationship. He returned to me afterward, concern etched on his face. Do you want us to call the police, Mr. Mendoza? No, I said, straightening my jacket, smoothing the fabric like I was smoothing away their presence. Just make sure they're on the banned list. They're not to be allowed entry to the building under any circumstances. But they didn't stop. Somehow, they got my new address. I came home one night to find them camped outside my building's entrance, Isaac with the kids again, using them as emotional blackmail while Mom and Dad tried to sneak in behind other residents. We're not leaving until you help your brother, Mom shrieked as I called building security. They would show up at random times after that, pounding on my door, yelling through it about family obligations and what a horrible person I was. I started taking different routes home, varying my schedule, looking over my shoulder everywhere. My carefully constructed peace was being invaded by the very people who had shattered it in the first place. It was when they started contacting my colleagues and business associates that I finally broke. I had been trying to handle it on my own, thinking they would eventually give up, but they were escalating instead of backing down. The time for quiet dignity was over. I called my cousin Martin, who had remained neutral through it all. My voice trembled slightly as I asked for help. I know a great lawyer, he said softly. She handles family cases, restraining orders, that kind of thing. Her name is Clara Riaño. Clara turned out to be exactly what I needed, tough, practical, and completely unfazed by family drama. She helped me organize everything, screenshots of every text, security footage from my building and office, witness statements from my doorman and colleagues, copies of their social media posts, logs of every attempt they had made to contact me after being told to stop. We're filing for a restraining order, Clara explained as we prepared for court, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had seen this story before. They'll be legally prohibited from coming near you, your home, or your place of work. No contact by any means, physical, digital, or through third parties. And we're requesting $115,000 in damages for emotional distress and reputational harm. I wasn't prepared for how it would feel to see them in court. They looked smaller somehow, less menacing under the fluorescent lights. Isaac had left the kids at home for once, though he still managed to cry on cue. My parents sat there looking bewildered, like they couldn't understand how their actions had led to this moment. Their defense was weak, transparent. They were just trying to help their son reconnect with family. They were worried about me. They just wanted me to see my nieces and nephews. The judge wasn't impressed. The evidence of harassment is clear and substantial, she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like truth through lies. The restraining order is granted in full. The defendants are to have no contact with the plaintiff by any means, direct or indirect. The court awards the requested damages of $115,000. This is ridiculous. Mom jumped to her feet, her carefully constructed mask finally shattering completely. We're his parents, we have rights. You ungrateful little bastard, Dad yelled at me, his face contorted with rage. Isaac dissolved into hysterics, sobbing about his children again, his favorite weapon of emotional manipulation. The judge's gavel came down like a gunshot. One more outburst, and I will hold you all in contempt. Furthermore, given your behavior in my courtroom, I am adding a $5,000 fine for each defendant. That was 6 months ago. The restraining order works. They can't come near me, contact me, or post about me online. The damages and fines hit them hard financially. From what Martin tells me, though I try not to think about them at all, I don't know what they're doing now. I don't know if Isaac and Helena are still together. If the kids are growing up happy, if my parents have learned anything from all of this. And the beautiful thing is, I don't need to know anymore. Every morning, I wake up in my peaceful apartment, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that frame a view of the city I earned for myself. The silence is no longer lonely, it is full of possibility. My home is not defined by what is missing, but by what I have built, a sanctuary where every piece of furniture, every piece of art on the walls tells the story of my journey, not my loss. Sometimes, when I'm having my morning coffee on my balcony, watching the city wake up beneath me, I think about that scared, broken man crying on his bathroom floor 3 years ago. I wish I could tell him that the end of his dream would become the beginning of something much more precious, the discovery of his own strength. They say living well is the best revenge. But I have learned it's not about revenge at all. It's about realizing that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who teach you the harshest lesson, that the only truly unconditional love you need is the kind you learn to give yourself. My life now is not what I planned when I was that naive 24-year-old, planning a wedding. It's better. Every decision I make is mine. Every accomplishment belongs solely to me. Every smile on my face is genuine, not a mask worn to please others. I have learned that family is not always about blood. It's about the friends who hold you while you cry. The colleagues who become champions of your success. The strangers who become allies in your darkest moments. It's about choosing your own tribe, one that celebrates your growth instead of demanding your surrender. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy me became the foundation upon which I built something unbreakable, myself. And that, perhaps, is the biggest plot twist of all. Sometimes the hardest chapters in our lives become our greatest teachers. They show us that we are stronger than we ever imagined, braver than we ever knew, and worthy of so much more than we ever settled for. They teach us that rock bottom can become solid ground if we are brave enough to build upon it.